Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan Podcast, brought to you by the Hockey News. With over 2 million dedicated readers, the Hockey News is the authoritative source of hockey and the #1 hockey publication in North America. With an ever-growing podcast network and video database on top of an already established print and digital brand, the Hockey News is there to cover all the major hockey stories from around the world. Visit thn.com/deal to get the best value on a subscription to the Hockey News. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan, and joining me as usual, my co-host, former 50-goal scorer, Rick Squid Vaive. How's things, Squid?
Things are fantastic. They couldn't be better. It's today anyway. Yesterday was not a great day with the passing of one of my good friends, Dale Howerchuk, and one of my old teammates, roommates, and neighbors. So that was a little tough, but things are a little bit better today.
Yeah, so I mean, I know you guys played together in Buffalo, and it's very tough for everybody. Have you got a special moment you can share with us that, that involved Dale and yourself? Or maybe not you, but just with Dale?
Well, I mean, he was my roommate, and we lived about 4 houses apart. Our kids played together in the cul-de-sac. It was wonderful. Dale was had a calming way about him. And I remember we went to San Jose. It was my last year in Buffalo. And of course, we had a rookie dinner, which instead of hazing or initiation, it was a rookie dinner, but we only had 5 rookies or 4 rookies. And we're all at one big long table, and the guys are getting a little out of hand, and they're starting to order Dom Perignon and everything. And Dale was sitting to my right, and I said, Dale, look what these guys are ordering. I said, this is kind of crazy. He just stood up very nonchalantly and quietly and just said, guys, we only have 4 or 5 rookies. They're not making a lot of money. I would appreciate it very much, all of us, if you would cut back on what you're ordering as far as price-wise. And then all the guys just looked. They all nodded. Yep. Okay. No problem, Dale. And so that was the way he was. He didn't have to yell or scream or anything when he stood up, and he just said something like that. And it was, like I say, it was very calm, direct, and all the players appreciated it. And obviously he had a lot of respect for Dale, and therefore it stopped. So that was one of the things I remember about him, is that he was very good at being a very calming influence on the players.
Well, that's a great story. I mean, that just shows you the respect that he commanded, or he gained in the dressing room with the players, and that says a lot about a guy's character right there. So that's he certainly touched a lot of lives, both inside the rink and away from the rink, and that's the real sign of a good man. And he's certainly going to be missed.
He certainly will, and he'll be missed dearly by the Barrie Colts, who I think he did a fantastic job there developing players. Svechnikov, Scheifele, I mean, the list goes on of the players that played for him and went on to play in the NHL. He was a big part of teaching those guys what they needed to do to get to the National Hockey League and to stay there. And a lot of gratitude to him for really bringing those players along so that they could be good NHL players.
The dissection of the Leafs continues, and I think I've seen in social media every player has been moved, which we're going to touch on next with our couple of our guests that were actually teammates of my co-host, Mr. Ricky Vaive. We've got today joining us Danny Daoust and Tommy Fergus. How's it going, boys?
Very good, thank you.
Very good.
Great to hear. Now listen, it's the elephant in the room all the time as Maple Leaf fans now, guys sitting watching this, and I see you guys down at the alumni box a lot. As followers of the team, can you guys offer some views on what the Leafs have to do next for this group to get to the next level? Let's start with you, Danny.
Sure.
It's a tough question.
Put us on the spot right away.
Yeah, no kidding.
Thank God I'm not going for a job. Well, I think everybody says it. Everybody sees it in the papers or radio stations, whatever. that they got to get rid. They need some defense. There's no question about it. Where do you get those defenses? It's not going to be easy, but they need to start there. I think. Yeah, they didn't score any goals. They lost 2-0, I think, and 3-0 in one game or whatever it was. But you need to score goals, and when you're paying somebody $44 million and 4 guys, I mean, somebody's going to step up at some point and score some goals. There's talk about the goaltender, maybe getting rid of him. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not going to score 1 or 2 goals for him, it's pretty tough for him to keep pucks out every night. So I think the D part, I think we got to start there. Who you go and get, who knows? I mean, again, people have talked about Peter Angelo, but he's not going to come cheap. He's going to come at $8 million unless he wants to give a discount. Nobody seems to want to give a discount anymore. So we'll see what happens.
Tommy?
Well, I agree with it. I don't like to blame the goaltending. I think he stops a lot of pucks. Maybe he shouldn't. Everyone lets in a bad one every now and then. Their defense, I don't think they're up to snuff. I just don't think they're good enough in their own end. And that could be a combination of the forwards not helping out in the defensive end. As far as the forward lineup, I don't like the 4-line combinations. They have great players. They don't have enough grinders. I don't think you can win the cup without a good bunch of grinders that can punish themselves through 4 rounds of playoffs. They have great players, but they just don't have a great team.
Squid, you want to add something to that?
Well, we talked about it, Mike, today, and and I totally agree that they got to shore up their defense. There's no question, and for the sake of maybe having to move 2, maybe 3 of their top 6 or 7 supposed players, I still think they would have enough firepower. But if they loaded up the 3rd and 4th lines with more, like Tom said, a 3rd line, first of all, that can shut down another team's top line, and then a 4th line energy line, and they need to do that. And then their top 2 lines are they would still have 2 great offensive lines, and but defense first. And again, like Tom said, for Anderson, I mean, I don't like to blame him either. I mean, yeah, let a bad goal in the last game, but what goaltender doesn't, at some point, and especially when you're getting peppered with 40-some shots most nights. The law of averages are that a bad one's going to go in.
Well, the thing about it is that there's a lot of trades being thrown around out there. And one of the names that keeps bouncing coming out of Edmonton, who's been under extreme pressure, obviously being traded for Taylor Hall, is Adam Larson. And he comes back. He's making $4.1 million. He's a unrestricted free agent at the end of 2021. So he's the type of guy that could fit the bill, and you're going to give something up. But that's almost like putting a finger in the dam, because the real issue is we know the imbalances between the defense and the forwards. And I mean, again, let me throw this at you guys. Here's a loaded question for you. I mean, making moves like that are great. But if you want to go after some of the prime candidates that are out there, like a Pietrangelo or a Torrey Krug, that would just absolutely take the Leafs defense to the next level, they've got to make a move that's almost unheard of to get to that level. And that means moving one of the unthinkables, somebody like a Mitch Marner. Can any of you guys see that happening? Let's start with you, Tommy.
I'm a Torrey Krug fan, but I'm a fan because he's on the Boston Bruins.
Yes, okay.
I've seen so many guys move off there or move on there, and their careers have taken different paths. The Bruins are a good organization for someone like Torrey Krug. I think he'd make a big mistake if he leaves.
Okay.
I don't think at this time I'd give up on a Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, but I think everyone else on the team is touchable. You can trade them if you can get the right guys, because they've got to readjust the team to be more of a bigger, stronger team. I think we'll get enough goals, but we got to keep them out of our net too.
Danny?
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, it's too early to get rid of those guys. I mean, with Tavares, I'll put Tavares in there being untouchables right now. I would think those 3 guys would be the guys. I don't know if you get rid of Morgan Riley. You need him a defenseman. He's got to stick around. But I mean, Nylander's always been the talk of him going. And I mean, maybe with an Anderson making $5 million next year, is it? And then after that, if he comes as a free agent, he's not going to want $2 million. He's going to want more, or even as per se, do you get rid of an Anderson and give a Jack Campbell a shot? I mean, Campbell, when he came over from LA, I think it was 10, 14, and 6. Those are just numbers I thought I saw somewhere. And he was like 2.83 goals against average with a .917 save percentage, just around those numbers. So why not give somebody like him a chance who played some games, and played some good games? And then with money you save, let's say you do get rid of an Nylander, an Anderson, if you can save enough money. I mean, CC doesn't look like he's coming back. It doesn't look like Barry's coming back. So, I mean, you should have enough money. I mean, being Campbell, I think he's under contract for what, 1.5 or $2 million, yeah. I think is what it is. So that's cheap that you might be able to make some move. If they're talking about Peter Angelo, I mean, if they do lose out to Vancouver, I mean, that could be, he could be saying, hey, you know what, I'm 30 years old. Maybe I go back home. Maybe it's something I do. But a lot of people all about St. Louis, they always say they love being in St. Louis. They always want to stay there. So who knows what can happen there. Nashville has a good team over there, but never seems to get anywhere. So do you go get that, what's that defenseman, Roman or?
Josie?
Yeah.
Wow.
Roman Josie.
You go get some. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you go get somebody like him. I mean, we need a top-notch defenseman. I understand that Riley might be a good defenseman, and but after him, I mean, you got Muzzin, but Muzzin's going to be, he may play against with Hull next year against your top lines on the other side all the time, but he's not a guy you're looking for like some of the other guys. He'll throw in a goal here and there, but he came in, he played the power play, but now he's not playing the power play anymore. So basically he's just a defensive defenseman at this point in time. So you need somebody of that caliber, Peter Angelo, Yossi, or that type of defenseman to come over here somehow.
But those are elite defensemen, and those guys are really hard to find. And with Toronto, don't forget they're going to be losing some players themselves this year, and they're knocked up against the cap. And the problem they're always going to be knocked against the cap, as any of the winning teams are. But Tavares has a no-trade contract, so he's not going anywhere. Austin Matthews isn't going anywhere. And outside of that, as Tommy mentioned, I think anybody in the roster is pretty much up for grabs. So that's where it comes down to the tough decision, because they need money. And Nylander's the first one. He seems to always get picked on, but that is 31 goals you're giving up.
But isn't that, we also have to, when they make the trades, I think they've got to alter the team.
Oh, no question.
You got to make trade. You can't just bring in, I mean, I'm all for Small and all these guys can play well in the league. But I find, like St. Louis winning the cup last year, they sort of grinded a lot of their way through those playoffs. They had some good players, but they had some big D, some tough forwards that just grinded it out and came up with wins.
Well, it's one of those things.
I think if you look at,
go ahead,
Mike, you look at all the teams that win the Stanley Cup. They're all built that way. They got some good players. They got some little guys that can play, and they got guys that can put up offense. But by and large, they have their makeup of their third and fourth lines, and most of the teams, their defense, at least half of their defense, are big, strong, grinding type guys. That, because don't forget, you got to go. First of all, you got to make the playoffs, and that's another thing. If they lose CC, Barry, and whatever, who knows what's going to happen next year. But once you get there, you got to go through 4 grueling rounds to win the Stanley Cup. And if you look at the teams that have won it, they've all had those ingredients. And I agree with Tom wholeheartedly. I mean, St. Louis last year had a big, strong team. They punished other teams physically, but they also had some good players that could score some goals, and their goaltending was excellent as well. So it's a combination of everything. And I mean, obviously Toronto, in a situation like that, if they're going to shore up their blue line and their third and fourth lines, more grinding type lines, they're going to have to move some big names and move a lot of money as well.
And that's the elephant in the room, and that's why 16 is the number. At some point, who knows, if you want to get to that level, something drastic is going to have to happen. no question. So we will watch with that with great interest. And as I said to you last week, boys, I told Squid that if Cal Dubas is listening to us, he won't be in his job very long, and he can come and join this podcast if he doesn't have his own ideas. And we had an actual name for it, Squid Doobie and the Ultimate Leafs Fan. So he has a new job if he starts listening to us. Now, let's get to a couple other pressing things here. Danny, let's go back to the beginning here. You guys go way back, you and Tommy, a lot of connections. You played 3 years in Cornwall, winning a Memorial Cup. First off, just take us through that year. And I mean, yeah, I may want to pick up on that. You also played with a guy, and, you know, let's maybe get this out of the way first off. I'm sure you want to make a tribute to Dale Howerchuk, who you played with, and the two of you are almost neck and neck in scoring the year you played together and won a cup.
Yeah, you know, Dale was, again, us playing in the Quebec League. Here's a star from Toronto coming to Cornwall, which is probably unbelievable that we got him, just the way things worked out. But, you know, here comes this 16-year-old little skinny kid coming from Oshawa to play on our team. But, you know, you heard so many good things about him. He came, you know, was very quiet. But as we all know, a great hockey player. I mean, you know, and then I played only 1 year with him because I was gone after the 79-80 season. He played one more year in Cornwall, then went to Winnipeg, and we all know where that led for him in his career. And I got to play against him along the way, you know. But and in the summer times, playing golf tournaments, he was just a great player on ice and a great person off the ice. He always had time for everybody. Never had anything bad to say. So it's sad to see you know, a friend leave us at 57 years old, for sure.
Now, that cup that you guys won together in 79, Tommy, you were involved in that on the other side, and it was a little bit controversial that, so maybe you want to, let's get the Peterborough angle on that and maybe rehash kind of what happened from your side.
Well, you know, it's one of those years I don't think the best team won, but, you know.
Hey, you can be right. You can be right, but we won.
I'm always happy to be around Dew, and I get to see his ring all the time. It's really nice to look at.
I didn't wear it just so I didn't want to show it here, but I will look for something else though.
Well, I'll tell you, if you go back to that time, they did have that young Howerchuk and Dew. They had a good team. We were a big, if you think of a team that we had no we had Larry Murphy, but our first line was just a very good line, and we had 4 lines that everybody just chipped in. And I actually think, if the record shows, London a year ago was the only team that had more wins in a row in the playoffs than we had. But, you know, stuff happens. They said we weren't. I think our interest in one of the games was very low, no question about it. Again, someone asked me if I threw the game. I said, well, I only had 8 goals in 63 games. You think I was good enough to throw the Memorial Cup? But I think that's all talk. Did we play our best game? No. Were we playing another team that was pretty good? Yes. So, I mean, then my only regret is the best team didn't win it.
You know, and when we come to saying that, I don't know. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know if everybody can see it. You know,
I can see it.
Memorial Cup ring, and I don't. Oh, I forgot to show this picture too. I don't know. I got a Memorial Cup there, holding it.
I guess we got someone living in the past there. No, he's got them handy.
But you know, at the end of the day, we had again, like the 3 teams that were there. I think the giant team probably was supposed to be Regina. They were kind of sleeping at the wheel. They kind of woke up 3/4 into it. For our team, I mean, we had Mark Crawford, we had Fred Arthur, we had Scotty Arneal. You got Dale. Ron Scott was our goaltender. So we had some decent players. We weren't expected to win. I mean, when we went into Sherbrooke, which is Ricky's, Altamont junior, Sherbrooke Beavers, we won the first game 5-4. We went there and we won the first game. The next 2 times we went in there, we lost 13-2 and 11-1. And I think the ice bags were on our heads, and we came out of there. I mean, we were so damaged. I don't even know how we went back home and were able to play. And the only reason why we probably won those games is because the referees wouldn't have got out alive out of Cornwall if they didn't ref the right way. I mean, there was no penalties called against Sherbrooke over there. Nothing. I mean, it was just chaos when we played them. But, we got lucky and won the three games we needed to win at home after we beat them the first game there. But we did have a good team. I mean, so did Peterborough. Were we supposed to win? At the end of the day, toss it up in the air. Our team was good enough to win. Maybe the other teams were better than us. But at the end of the day, we were the victors, right?
Back then, the Quebec League team was always the underdog at the Memorial Cup. I mean, I went there in, I don't know what it was, 76 or 77, 78, and everybody just counted us out. We had the Ottawa 67s and New Westminster, and they were great teams, but we had a decent team too. But I just thought that every Memorial Cup, the Quebec League team was always at the bottom, and the other teams were supposed to win, and the Quebec League team wasn't supposed to win.
Well, you know what? They can say all they want there, Danny, but you know what? They only gave out how many rings? 20?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Does that mean you're on his side?
All they want. Just flash the finger. So now, all three of you guys were drafted by the Leafs, but you ended up traded here. And all three of you didn't finish your careers in Toronto, but elsewhere. So let's start off with you, Danny, while you got I see your face on the screen here, so let's go with you. What was it like? And I guess to add to this even more, to give you a little bit more juice on this. Now, Squid, you came from the WHA, then you went to Vancouver, but Vancouver was only a league for 10 years roughly at that time. So they really didn't have kind of the history and tradition, whereas you two guys came from original 6 teams, Montreal and Boston. Talk about kind of some of the differences you saw coming in from Montreal to Toronto when you ended up here.
Well, I mean, you go from Montreal, which is they had just won. I played in the minors for 2 years, but they had just won 76 to 80. They won 4 Stanley Cups, and then I came in and went down to Nova Scotia for 2 years, and then my third year I made the team. So what you got to look, and I'll go back, but getting traded here to Toronto, that feeling just wasn't the same. It was, when you go in, it was like a losing attitude when you came to Toronto. Montreal was not like that. I mean, Montreal, everybody's on a high pedestal. The team's doing so well. I mean, you're walking around with Guy Lafleur, Larry Robinson, Guy Lapointe, Steve Shutt. I mean, those are the guys that I was, went to training camp with. That's how the guys I made the team with until they traded me to Toronto. And then when you come here to Toronto, well, it's you can see the difference, the way the teams acted, the way the teams practice and stuff like that. But I mean, for me, it was a chance. I mean, they had 6 centers in Montreal. I wasn't going to take Wickenheisen's place, Mondu, Acton, those guys. I mean, and to beat Guy Carbonneau, who was a 2nd-round pick. I signed as a free agent with Montreal. He's a 2nd-round pick, getting 185 points, which screwed me that last year. So I still look in the books as what was done is as we're going to start Dan. And when it falters, then we're going to put Guy in, and then whatever took place. I never played. I played the first 3 games, and after that, I didn't play till I think it was November 22nd in St. Louis because somebody was sick, and then they traded me December 17th to Toronto. So there's a big difference of the attitudes from Montreal to Toronto.
Tommy?
That's funny. That's the exact word I was going to use. When I went to Boston, losing wasn't even on I don't think I ever heard the word. If we lost 2, even 3 games in a row, Harry would come down, and I'll tell you, that room was dead quiet. He was fuming, and he wasn't taking losing. It was just as simple as that. And for 4 years, I think we were amongst the top, at least 5 or 6 teams in the league when I was there. Little money issues and that, and I get traded to Toronto. But I also irritated Harry, so he traded me to a lower place team. I spoke to him about it.
You got to follow up on that. How'd you irritate him?
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
So
can we get back to that one?
Yeah, get back to that.
I had negotiation deals and he didn't want. He still is probably wherever he is the cheapest guy ever. So, but when I got traded, I live in Ontario, but I grew up in Montreal. So I didn't have the affection for the Leafs at the time that I did for the Bruins because I grew up loving the Bruins. And I grew up and I lived in Montreal. Montreal just won too much back in those days. But the biggest thing I saw when I came here, and I think if I'm not mistaken, we were 0-8 and got a tie in Detroit. Wow. I was shocked at just at how the GM and everybody acted to not winning in 8 games. So it was almost like, well, what have I done here? Maybe the odd time I should shut my mouth. But playing in Toronto was a lot of fun. They just had a fully different atmosphere. And that's why I say Krug wants all this money. He goes out of Boston and he goes to the wrong team. He'll know what it's like, that a little less money to stay in Boston is not a bad idea, because Boston just has that attitude. They skate around to this day like they own the ring. And that's what we lacked in Toronto. But from management down, didn't permeate that sort of attitude.
Yeah.
Well,
so let me ask
that's
you this.
what I was going to say, guys, is like when we were there, management, like I can remember, actually, I don't know how many players, Gary Nyland and Jimmy Benning and Boimstruck, and I mean, the list goes on, Russ Courtnall, several other guys that were brought in, I think, way too early. And I think that was Jerry putting pressure on himself, saying, we got to get these guys in here. And, Jimmy Benning was physically and mentally like a 16-year-old. Gary Nyland was probably physically ready to play, but mentally he wasn't. And so is it fair to say that, we drafted good players, we had good players, but management didn't pull the right strings. We didn't have a whole lot of great coaches either during that time. And I thought we had pretty good teams and pretty good players. And with the right management and the right coaching, I think we could have been a whole lot better. Maybe not Stanley Cup winners, but we could have been a lot better team.
And
the culture.
That's exactly what I tell people. If you look at the lineups we had really good teams. The direction was never there. We didn't even use guys at what they were good at. We just sort of, and again, coaching was, I think, an issue too, but the coach would probably say us players were an issue, but we did have some good players in those days. We no question about it. You look up the lineups, we had some tough guys, we had some grinding checkers, we had some goals. We did have everything, but nobody ever put it together to say, okay, this is how we're going to play.
Well, the funny part about it is that was one of the questions I was going to ask you guys, is that do you ever reflect back? Because Rick and I have talked about this a number of times about some of the players being brought along too quickly, the young guys, and you guys sitting watching this, and the players know when they watch, and they know whether a guy's ready, whether he's maturely ready, whether he's skill ready, or he's ready emotionally ready. You guys know. And
let me jump in on that. It's an interesting point, because I went to the Bruins as an underage, and I hadn't even scored 10 goals in junior. But when I played my second year and went in, I was 2 years out of junior D hockey. But as I came in, the older guys, because they had come along, like Ray Bourque, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he was captain of the Boston Bruins until he was in his 10th year. So they had older guys that really looked after the younger guys. Because was I ready at 18 to play? Probably not. But because they had such a core of guys, and the way those core guys were taught how to do it, it made it easier on me. Toronto, they rammed in probably what they do 1 year, 4 or 5 D. They never played a game in the NHL. They're on the D of one of the highest viewed teams in the league. It just
So as walking into Boston as a coming out of there as an 18-year-old, what was it like your first camp? Like, you're obviously very nervous, but you just touched on that a lot of the veterans helped you, and you mentioned Ray Bourque. Because in those days, a lot of the old guys, they weren't quite as accommodating as they are, say, today with the young guys coming in. And
I went actually to camp. I was the start of the underage, I believe, or the second year. So I went to camp after scoring 8 goals. I thought, why not? And I'll tell you, the older guys, And I was drafted third round, so it wasn't like I was an early pick. And they always treated you good there. I have nothing but fond memories of Boston and those older guys. The older guys, Wayne Cashman, O'Reilly, Don Marcotte, they all treated you well. And they had to know that these young punks are coming up to take my job. It's just the way they just had a great system there of helping the younger guys. I'm glad I started there.
There was the same thing. It was the same thing when out of Montreal. I mean, when I got traded, we were in Calgary on a road trip, and you know what? I mean, yeah, I made the team that year, but I wasn't playing much. But you know, the first I forget who it was. I think it was Larry, or it might have been Guy Lapointe. Said when I got traded, basically it was okay. We're going out to dinner. You're coming out with us. You know, I got a plane to catch. You know, and you can catch it tomorrow is what they said. And I missed the game. I think when we played Chicago at home when I first got here. But it was like, no, we're going out to dinner. You know, like you just got traded and the whole bit, and that's how they were. Like same thing with Boston. And Montreal was an older team with all the old guys, and they were all. That's what they said to Gaston Gingras, who'd been there for a while, and myself. Now we're going out to dinner, and we're, you know, that's the way it goes. So I think the same boat as Montreal and Boston. We're all when we got to Toronto. Yeah, I mean it wasn't that we had a lot of, you know. A lot of cups won in the last 6-7 years, or much older guys there. I mean, they all traded the Wilfs and the Lannys and everybody else were gone. I mean, I don't know. Boria was the oldest guy that was there. After that, I think maybe, I don't know, Rick, I don't know how old you were at the time, but in 82, how old were you? 24?
23.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, we were young, right? We were young.
Yeah. And it's safe to say that, you know, with the whole Harold Ballard and Jerry McNamara as a general manager, and, you know, we weren't in a position, of course, you know, Punch dissembling all the older guys, getting rid of all the older players and bringing a lot of young people in. And it was very difficult for us as young guys to kind of, you know, be those mentors and everything. And the culture was terrible when we all got there. And mainly because of Harold and of course, Jerry making some of the moves that he made. But I just thought that there was bad things done by management that hampered us from having a better culture and being a better hockey team. And it's all about culture. That's exactly what it is. Like Danny talked about it, you talked about it in Boston, Montreal. That's the way it is. You come in, you don't expect to lose. Losing is not even a word around those organizations. And that's been like that for forever. In Toronto, it was pretty good in the 70s. And then all of a sudden, things just turned like that. And everything kind of went downhill after that.
Well, you know, the funny part about it is, I mean, I was going to ask you, Tommy, but we'll get to that maybe in a second. I mean, growing up, obviously, you guys are aware of, even though if you weren't a fan of Maple Leafs, the aura of Maple Leaf Gardens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the history of the Canadians, and so on. And everybody in hockey is aware of that. But you guys, I mean, I got to ask you guys, this is for all three of you. Did you wake up some mornings, just like once you got inside the bubble of this hockey team, and especially coming from Boston and Montreal, you know, what winning proud traditions they had and the way that the atmosphere of the team was, and the clown show that was going on in Toronto on a daily basis, did you just wake up mornings thinking, what's this going to be today? Tommy?
Unfortunately, yeah, we did. I mean, there's some good stories about how some of the coaching was changed. And it was, for myself, it was very tough because even if there were times you wanted to move, I already asked to be moved out of Boston. So you wanted things, and then every time we hired or brought in a new guy, you thought it would be different. But it just seemed to, I think it starts at the top. It's no different than a big corporation. If it's run well at the top, you bring in, because I have no question that we had a lot of talent. I don't think we used it as effectively as probably we had all hoped. I think guys on another team would have had different careers. But Toronto was a great place to play. I mean, I enjoyed playing here 100%. I just wish some of the things changed and we had better years. I mean, you don't like to look back and say, oh, you struggled in the 80s. You like to say we had great teams. We won, you know, we didn't win the cup But hey, a lot of teams never win the cup that have good teams.
Well, Danny, what about you? I mean, just this, I mean, all the whole circus of ownership and what was going, I mean, think about the proud tradition of this hockey club. And then you guys are living this and you're just shaking your heads thinking, what is this? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, as a 22-year-old, you're just full of piss and vinegar, basically, and you just want to play hockey. So when you get traded, yeah, at first, because I'm from Montreal and my team's the Montreal Canadiens, and it's almost like I had a few tears in my eyes when I got the call from Bob Berry to go in his office and kind of say, well, you've been traded. Oh, okay, what do I do now? Type thing. You're 22 years old. So when you come to Toronto, yeah, they were losing. And when we first got here, I think I missed the Saturday game against Chicago. And then I think we went on a road trip to Chicago and St. Louis. We lost both those games. I think it was a high score in Chicago and not as bad. So it's kind of okay. But it seemed like as we went along, then we started winning some hockey games. And the team started getting better. And a guy named Rick Vaive started scoring goals. I think he had 12 goals on December 17th. So he started scoring some goals. And once he started scoring goals and the team started to go, we started winning games. And that year we made the playoffs. At first, I don't think I had – Tommy came in at a different time. I don't think I had enough time to see what kind of a clown act we had as later on in the years. Because when I came in, like I said, you just want to play. You want to do the best you can. You're giving an opportunity. You're playing on the top line. So you go out there and do whatever you can. And then after losing a few games, it's still not the end of the world. We can make this ship turn around. And all of a sudden we start winning and we're winning more games and teams playing well, and they called up a few guys from the minors, older guys like Dave Fergus was called up from the minors. And so was on defense. And that's where it all starts most of the times. Your D, who's the coach in LA with the mullet there? What's his name?
Squid. Barry Melrose.
Yeah, Barry. So
Barry Melrose. Yeah.
So we had
Cyprus.
So we had some, we got better and we did better. As the years went on, now things go differently, and Tommy comes in. But Tommy came in, I think, not as so good time as I came in. So it was two different times that we came in. He came in about 4 years later than I did, and it was going downhill at that point. It wasn't going uphill.
It's Cyrus, by the way, but Don Cherry used to call him Cyprus. Now, Tommy, where were you the day you got traded, and how did that news come across to you? Now, Squid, we know where you were. Squid's is a good story because he was busy cleaning up beer bottles from the party from the night before, and Harry Neal was waiting for him in the lobby of his hotel or his apartment. So, can you top that one?
We didn't have an apartment. We didn't have an apartment. Gary Lupel and I were rooming together, but I lived with Glenn Hanlon and Burnaby because our apartment wasn't going to be ready till February.
Okay.
And it was in the apartment building next door to Harry Neal's, and we had a little apartment warming party the night before, and the next day my phone was ringing by the bed, and it wasn't even connected yet. But I guess when you press the buzzer at the front door, the phone rings, and then you got to press a button on the phone to let the person in. Well, I failed to do that twice. The third time, Harry said, "Just come downstairs." But by then, I had already cleaned up all the empty beer bottles and liquor bottles and everything else, and we were just throwing them in cupboards to get rid of them so that he wouldn't see them. And then that was like 6:30 or 6:45 in the morning, and then I went downstairs. He said, "We just traded in Toronto," and I had a 1 o'clock flight I had to catch.
Tommy, you.
Mine was, it was a Thursday, I believe, and I had gone a little crazy after practice, and I asked to be traded. So I knew it was coming because I was wearing a sweater that wasn't even in the color sphere in this world the next day at practice. So I knew it was coming, and Harry made the trade, and I think we played the Leafs that night in Boston. Then I was traded that night or Saturday morning, and I played Saturday night in Maple Leaf Gardens. But I was ready. I was 2 years I had a negotiation deal, and he never gave me the average years was 4.2, and I was in my fifth year and I had never got a raise. So, if you're not going to make money then, when are you going to make it? So that was my story. I was gone out of there quickly.
Now you were traded for a fairly popular player, a friend of 22's, Billy Derlago, who I think it's known a little bit, and Rick will probably back me up in this story, that they was sort of pushing him a little more to spend his summers with a bar on his back, meaning a squat bar as opposed to leaning against a bar. And Billy kind of took the latter. And, lo and behold, after scoring a couple of goals, I think they played in exhibition games against you guys. He scored a couple of goals and was traded. And he couldn't figure out why. So you want to replace him. How was that? And how did 22 treat you when you walked in the door?
Oh, I don't, it is what it is. It's business. I knew getting here that, and after I met Billy, I knew he was well liked. I knew he was, Billy's a great guy. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. But I think that was the downfall, because you were on a team that you got away with maybe things you shouldn't do. We all did it. Maybe he got caught a little more. But we all did it. When you went to Boston, Harry wasn't going for any of that stuff, right? But no, I knew he was popular, but it was for me, it was a good time to get traded. Probably Billy wasn't overly excited about it, but hey, that's the way it goes.
Now we did touch on this. There was I don't know if you guys were or not, but there was an 11-year span, that 11-year span between 79 and 90 and 91, I guess you would call it, 90, 91. Toronto went through 10 coaches, 5 GMs. And I couldn't even count the number of players that went through those rosters over the years. You three guys were all teammates for 2 years, playing under Dan Maloney and John Brophy. Not exactly mild-tempered guys. Danny, let's start with you on this one. What was the experience of playing under those two?
Well, I had John in Nova Scotia. So I had him there for my last year. So, coaches that I've had, I had Bert Templeton, who was a pretty hard-nosed coach in the OHL. Then I had John Brophy as a coach. Then you get Dan Maloney. Then you get to Mike Nicolak, and he's a lamb. He was a lamb compared to these two guys, or 3 guys, right? So it's like, at the end of the day, I've always said, like, you're there for a reason. You know what you've done to get there. So no matter what coaches you have, whether it's Dan Maloney, John Brophy, John basically, listen, when you lose 7-2 or 9-2 in Los Angeles, and all you do for 1 hour at your practice rink is skate one way, hard between blue line to blue line, and then glide all the way around for half an hour, and then you do the same thing going the other way. That just tells you what we had as coaching for, and John was a great guy. You sat with him at dinner, before games, all the stories, he give you the shirt off his back. It was a Jekyll and Hyde. When he got in the dressing room door open and closed behind him, it was a totally different person. So that's what we touched before about not having management or coaches to be able to be successful. I think that was one of our downfalls here in Toronto in the 80s.
Well, you and Rick both played for him twice. So, any story that comes to mind with him, do you just chuckle over that, this guy was like just the theatrics that would go on sometimes with him?
Well, we had the one in LA, which was caught on TV. He spent a lot of money on his suits, and he had a kind of a silvery suit that night in Los Angeles. And I think we were down 7-2 after the second period. So we have to walk all the way around the long way to get onto the rinks instead of coming out by our benches. It didn't exist at the time, but he went underneath. Instead of going around, he went underneath the seat. And I guess he came up a little too fast and kind of hit his head and must have punctured a little vein in your head. And we're skating around, and half his head was red. And we're saying, what the heck is going on here, right? We're looking at him and saying, bro, I think your head's bleeding. And after he just kind of shit all over us for 20 minutes in the dressing room, he's yelling some profanity on the bench to get away from him, leave him alone, that kind of stuff. The trainer threw him a towel. He said, I don't need this effing towel, and get out of my face type thing. And so that's one of the stories. There's a lot of other stories, but that was a clean one.
Tommy, what about you?
Well, I got there with Dan Maloney.
Yeah.
And I thought he was good, and I thought he got better as the season went on. And I think if you look at the 80s, from coaching to players, they always seem to let the wrong guys go. You go from goaltending to some of the players we got in and what we let go. The trading was all, so it was almost the same with the coaches. We had Maloney. I thought he was getting better as the season went on. I forget how we finished, but I thought he was definitely getting better. I thought it was a little shaky at the beginning, and then we bring in Brof, which again, the same as Duke. I like Brof. I thought he was funny, but he was way, way, way out of his league coaching in the National Hockey. I don't think we had a system except get it off the glass, and it was always interesting to me because I was a centerman that didn't visit the corners very often. I was wondering how I was going to get the puck to be able to do anything. So I liked him as a person, but coaching-wise, not the place for him to coach, not in Toronto. I know this is going to be the one thing that Mr. Vaive is not going to agree with. He's looking at me, he's aching to have something to say here. But, and as far as the other coaches, yeah, we did have some dingbats. We did. We really did.
Well,
for lack of better word, I'll leave it at that.
I'm not going to disagree with you, Tom, because I love Brof. I really did. I had him in Birmingham and again in Toronto. When I look at Brof, I look at a guy that if he had come into the National Hockey League in the early 70s, I think he would have had more success because systems weren't really part of the game back then. And Brof was more of a motivating type coach and, a hard ass and that sort of thing, but I love the guy. Brof wanted you to give him 100% at whatever type of game was your game. I know there were guys that thought that perhaps he wanted them to become tough guys and so on, which it was totally false. He just wanted you to give him 100% at whatever type of game you played. But unfortunately, systems and everything else were coming into play when he came into the league. I think if he comes in 12, 15 years earlier, I think he has more success. I really do.
Well, yeah, it was. Those were certainly trying times. You guys at least got to go on the ice to play. We had to sit in the stands and watch it, and and read about it every day with all the theatrics going on around those hockey clubs. Now, boys, there were some good times, obviously. Now, who were some of the characters, Danny? Let's go back. Some of the characters that you played with on some of those teams. Now, Squid told a story last week on the podcast about Paul Higgins. I mean, this is a pretty tough one to top, but there's a kid coming to camp and he forgot his skates at the cottage.
I could see that with Paul, but I don't know. I mean, the guys that were there, I mean, I can't really remember guys. I mean, like I said, we were kind of young there, like the Jim Bennings and the Gary Nylands, the Russ Courtnalls. I mean, Russ Courtnall was always, boisterous. He's always go. Young guys in Toronto, play a pretty good place to play in Toronto when you're young. But otherwise, I don't. I mean, I was one of the guys that maybe try to live it up a bit by doing some different things to the guys when they're showering and creams and powder and and blowers and stuff like that. Give me somebody who you got a good prank on one time. Well, it's
Harold.
What's that?
Well, the one you mentioned, the baby powder in the hair dryer. I don't know if it was you or who it was, but somebody did it. And of course, Harold had a shower. He came in and he's blowing his hair and there's white going everywhere. And he actually laughed and thought it was pretty funny.
I mean, I might have did it, but just nobody grabbed the right one after the shower. That's all. So he was lucky type thing, But no, we just try to have fun in there. And I mean, when John Kordick, when we traded for him, I mean, he was in the dressing room. I had a few squabbles with him type thing over the TV control. Like Johnny would come in and change channels while we're out, whether we're watching Price is Right, whatever it was after practice, before practice, and he'd come in and just change the channel. And then he'd kind of put the clicker down and go sit down. I'd get up and click it. Then he'd come back, click it. Then I just stood there one time and he came at me and I just jumped on him. So we rolled to the floor, but I knew there was going to be 19 guys helping me out anyways. So it wasn't that bad.
Hey,
speaking on that.
Speaking of trades.
Pardon me?
Speaking of trades.
You guys lived through that. Oh. That was a sad case. I mean, Tommy, you want to touch on that? I mean, that whole Kordick situation with Courtnall and then he comes in here and all the stuff that happened. Was he as really bad a case off the ice as it appeared?
You know what? John was a really good guy one-on-one. If there was a group, he always had to sort of do or say something stupid just to get noticed. I mean, it was a shame. He was a shame. But the thing with the hockey back then, we did no research into Kordic when we made the trade. We really needed a guy like Kordic, but we didn't need his behavior that was always offbeat. But at the time, we did need some toughness. I don't know if we trade Corno for it, but that's the kind of trades we made that put us in that problem. But I do have one story that's sort of off the beaten track. I was in Boston, and I was in my second or whatever year. And I think it was the year the Leafs had all those young defensemen. So we played in Boston, and I remember calling my mom, and I was all upset. I didn't get on the ice much. So she looked on the other end of the phone. She goes, "You could play in Toronto." So a year later, I'm on the Leafs. She just was like, "I can't believe you're on the Leafs."
Don't hope for what you wish for.
I will say one thing, and I can't remember what year it was when Freacher, Inachek, and all those guys, Duras, Slava Duras, and those guys all came over. That was the year that Harold slapped the flight attendant's hand on our charter because she wouldn't let him have any chocolate bars. So we flew commercial the rest of the year. So we stayed overnight after every road game, and we started going out together, and those guys started going out. We started kind of hanging out together, and I think we started to get to know one another, and I think there was more trust when we got on the ice, and I think we were the 5th best team in the league in the second half of the season after he canceled those charters. So the next year we probably should have flew commercial all year, but no, we went back to the charters.
No, but isn't that when he cut the per diems out on you guys to save money?
Well, what happened was we usually left at like 7:35, I think it was a cutoff of 7:30.
Yeah. And
he didn't have to pay us half a day meal money. And I went to him and I said, "Look, Harold, we're willing to leave at 3 or 4 to get there at a decent hour." Because a lot of times there was delays too, weather delays or whatever it might be. And I said, "So we can get in at a decent time and go and have a nice meal the night before a game. And you don't have to pay us the per diem." So he went along with it, and we started leaving earlier. And then I think it was maybe a year or two later, then I don't know whether the league made him or he just decided that he was going to pay us that extra per diem. But it was good that he did it. But I had to tell him that we weren't going to ask for the per diem.
Well, there was that story years later that all the guys, about half the team was bitching about their per diems. You know what that was? I was taking it all from them on the card games on the plane.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, okay.
Can you believe that, dude?
No, not at all. I know he plays cards. He wins nothing.
Hey, the worst part of those road trips were me and Dew were roomies, and we used to play Scrabble. And I'd lose to a French guy. He didn't even know the English words, and I was losing to him. That's why I thought going back to school was a good thing to do.
Now, speak about that. You two guys as roommates. Give us a couple stories on your roomie there.
Well, here I got one, dude, before Dude takes it from me. So we're pissed off, for lack of better words. I mean, it seemed everyone got along good for the amount of stuff that was going on. So one night, Bro calls a curfew at like 10 o'clock. Bory is sort of laughing. He goes, "My kids are out longer than he's letting us out." So me and Dew are sitting in the middle, the little table. We got the Scrabble game going on the door. I look at Dew. I'm not fucking answering it. He looks at me neither. Bro's out there for about 20 minutes, slamming the door. He hears us in there, but neither of us are getting the door. He didn't bench us. We were hoping to get benched.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we just didn't answer the door on that one. Too bad.
Danny, what about your roommate? You got a story on your roommate?
Like I was saying earlier on before, is that when you have some roommates, at times you may have somebody who, I'm a big maybe not now because I'm older, but you know, my 20s, I stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning. I watch TV, and that's just how I was. So when Tom came, they decided, because usually you change roommates. A lot of times, I think my first year we changed. I think I had Ricky. I think one of the first games we played in Montreal, Ricky was my roommate. And then you know, every road trip you had somebody.
And then Danny took me out and showed me all the hot spots in
Oh
Montreal.
yeah. All I know is I was in before you.
More than likely, yeah.
I was a rookie, so I was in before you. But you know, like after a while, we basically asked if we could have the same roommates, and Tom and I became roommates for 5 years. And I mean, we loved it. I mean, we got to be good friends, and you know, we like I said, I'd watch TV. He'd get to bed with his socks on and his hoodie and cross his arms. He'd fall asleep. That's how he slept all the time. It didn't matter. You know, just play jokes at each other. You go to Chicago, and what hotel we say at Chicago? The Drake.
The Drake.
The Drake.
The Marriott.
No, the Drake.
Stayed at the Drake after the Marriott couldn't get us in.
Yeah, and then you know we're into our
that's
rooms,
right.
and we each got our own bathrooms. We're across the hall. We'd be talking to each other on the phone. We grab the phones and talking to each other while we're on the throne. Sorry guys, but that's the way it is. That's what you do when you go on the road. There's not much to do, so you try to get the time going and that kind of stuff, and wait till your next game. But you know, Tommy was a great roommate. It was better than just having a single different guy all the time. So you get to know somebody for good, and we've become good friends. Our wives are good friends. As a matter of fact, our wives were just on the Zoom call themselves doing something. So it was good.
It's great. Now, listen, you guys got a chance to play with one of the great Maple Leafs of all time, Borje Salming. Tommy, what was that? What was your impression playing with the King?
He was just a great player, but his no matter what happened the night before or anything, you could always skate like the wind. And you know, he was a really good guy, great guy, and he just always seemed to be the same. He played well all the time. Can't imagine the pressure he was under before I got here when they started with those 4 rookie defensemen. And he never complained. I don't think I don't think to this day I've ever heard him complain about anything. And some of the things he went through, he's a guy in those years, if he played somewhere else, you wonder what he could have done. Because you play in the National Hockey League with 4 of them are kids out of junior. It's just not a position you do that, but the Leafs did it on Borje. So I had a great time playing with him. He was a great guy, and he was a great player, and it's good to see him in the Hall of Fame.
Dude?
Yeah, no, with me, I kind of have, when you're a kid growing up, there's 2 stories that I can go with. So one of the ones when I was in Montreal, when I lived up in Kirkland Lake, I went to Rouen-Noranda to hockey school, and one of my instructors was Réjean Houle. And then when I got to Montreal, well, Réjean Houle was my line mate. So it goes a long way from all of a sudden you're 12 years old going to hockey school while he's teaching you, and then all of a sudden you're his line mate in Montreal. So that's one of the stories. The other one is when I got traded to Toronto. So as a kid, I would always send NHL players, not all, but I mean, I'd send players asking for their autographs like people do to us today, right? So all of a sudden I go to Toronto, and a few months in, I call my mom. I said, hey, can you go into my dresser drawer and get that picture and send it to me? So she sends me the pictures. I walk up to Borje. I said, Borje, do you remember sending me this picture way back when? So he says, well, I guess I must have, because you got it in your hand. So, that's one of the stories. But with Borje, like Tommy said, I mean, always gave 125%. Always. I mean, like Tommy says, he never complained. The big thing about Borje, he's always sick all the time. I mean, when we walked into the Leaf dressing room, he sat. So when you walked in our room, the one door, and then we have a big stretching room, I guess you want to call it, and the coach's room was this side, and you had the double doors that opened up. And Borje would sit right against that wall when you walked in. So all the draft came all the time. Like Borje always had towels around him the whole bit, but he was always sick that they moved him. They said, you got to move. You got to go over here. You can't stay in front of his door all the time. You got to go over here. So he wasn't too happy about that, but he did. But I'm grateful that, like I said, I play with some great players. whether it was like Lafleur and Shaw and Robinson, and I came to Toronto, you play with Borja. I'll say even Ricky, great player, scored 50 goals 3 years in a row type thing, So, I mean, I had a lot of respect for Borja, and then when he went and got his 252 stitches in his face, I mean, and then, he just comes back and plays like nothing ever happened. And, he was a warrior. He was a true warrior.
Speaking of which, along those lines, what about when that kid from Kelvington showed up with the funny first name, Wendell Clark?
Yeah.
Talk about him.
I mean, Wendell's Wendell. I mean, he came in, and I think if you take a look at the picture, how he had the mullet coming in and the whole thing. And I mean, nobody really knew anything about Wendell. I mean, I never knew. You can play. He was supposed to be a defenseman. He gets a forward, and just the way he handles himself and goes out there and fights the biggest guys you can find instead of fighting the little guys. He made himself a name for where he is today. And I mean, he was a good player, worked hard, didn't take no crap from anybody. And when it was time to wake up the team, he would do it with a big hit.
Now, Tommy, when you saw him come in, now you touched on this before with all these young kids coming in and watching what was happening. When you saw Clark come in, what was your initial impression from you? Like thinking, here we go again. Is this kid going to go ready?
It was early. It was early. I didn't know. I same with you. I never even heard his name before, so I didn't know who he was. But he got into a couple of tussles with Ben Wilson early on, and a couple of fights. And I'm like, who is this? This kid's crazy, right? Because I had just come from Boston with Stan Jonathan and O'Reilly. And this young kid would take on anybody, anytime, anywhere, but he wasn't a dirty hockey player. He played up and down the wing. He'd hit. He'd do whatever it took to do what he had to do. But when he fought, he was a tough hombre, very tough. Like I hadn't seen anybody throw punches. He really tried to kill people. And he's actually the same he is today as he was then, just a little richer, I say.
What about you when you saw him?
Well, I actually knew a little bit about Wendell because I knew that we were going to probably have a very high pick. I watched the World Juniors to see, the guys that they were talking about and everything for the draft. And Wendell apparently made the team only if he was going to play forward. He was a defenseman in Saskatoon, but they said the only way you're going to make this team is if you play forward. So I remember watching it and watching him, play that physical game, even in the World Juniors against the Russians, the Swedes, and so on. And I kind of loved it. I thought, this kid, he's going to be able to play in this league, and he's going to do it pretty quickly too. And because he's not afraid to do anything, he's not afraid to go from defense to forward. My only thing that I ever thought about Wendell was, I thought maybe if he had stayed on defense, he probably could have been a Norris Trophy winner because he would have got so much room because of the way he played. And imagine him as a physical guy back on the back end and with that wrist shot from the point on the power play or something. But that never happened. But he did become a great left winger. And but boy, I'll tell you, Tom said it. I couldn't believe when him and Ben Wilson squared off. I think it was right in front of our bench. And they're just taking turns throwing haymakers, one after another. One guy would throw it, then the next guy. And he went toe-to-toe with Ben. And Ben was one of the toughest guys in the league at the time. And after that, I went, okay. I mean, this kid's really, really tough. And he took on the toughest guys in the league. He didn't go to the second class. He went to the top.
Yeah, and to
didn't
add
bother
on to
him at
that,
all.
if you think about it, what National Hockey League team brings in a first overall pick and changes his position? Like, I agree with Squid. He had a great career at left wing, but he might have been an unbelievable defenseman. And then we were lucky enough to do it again with Gary Lehman. We pick in the second round. He's a defenseman. We put him on right wing. So you don't even give him a chance to play D. And I think that there's another guy who would have been a great defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been the D we were always looking for.
Yep, that's good. But and then they tried to do that to Ian White a number of years later. Remember, they moved him up on the wing from defense. Did the same thing to him too.
But the problem is they didn't really give them a chance to fail or prosper on D. They moved them up pretty well. I never remember seeing them ever play defense ever.
Yeah. So, well, boys, it's been fun talking to you guys. I just want to wrap up here with a couple of things. Once you guys left the Leafs, and I got you, Tommy, on the screen here, so I might as well go with you. You played in Europe. So how was that experience, like coming from the national, going from Boston to Toronto, and then you went to Vancouver, but then you went to Europe at the end of your career. What was that adjustment like?
I don't know if it was an adjustment. It was 30, I think we played 36 games, but as I look back, the very best thing I ever did. And when I first got back to get a real job, I used to tell everybody, go for a year or two. Go. It's the best experience you'll ever have. And I was lucky enough to have some decent teams, because they do put a lot of heat on the import guys. I played with Kenny Yaremchuk there. They probably put a little too much heat on imports because you really need the team to win. But we had a lot of good Swiss guys. And when I look back, even with my wife, I said it's the best thing we ever did.
Danny?
Listen, Mike. In reality, the real reason he went to Europe, to Switzerland, is to follow me. He missed me.
Games.
So he missed me, so he had to come to Switzerland. He was too far away from me. No, I mean, listen.
I thought I thought it was because they only played 30-some games. That's probably the reason he went.
Yeah, no, but I don't know if I want to play 36 games and practice 2,036 times either, because that's what we did over there, right? So, but, I left on my own accord. I mean, I was 30 years old when I went over there, and I had a chance to sign with the Leafs. They wanted to offer me 1 year. I wanted 2 years, and they decided 2 years wasn't good. So I said, okay, I've got to go over there and see. At one point, I wasn't playing much with the Leafs anymore. At the end, it's based on penalty killing, and I may have been in the press box a couple of times or whatever. So it's just hockey. I wanted hockey to be fun for me still. At 30 years old, you're not done playing, so it wasn't fun here anymore. So that's why I decided to go over there, knowing that as an import, you're going to play 40 and 60 minutes. Especially, I won the B League. Tommy won the A League. In the B League, the Swiss players are not as good as in the A League, so you get more support there. So you're on the ice 40 out of 60 minutes, basically. And you love before it comes back because you're playing a lot, and I was there 7 years.
You're making good money. You're making good money too.
Well, you're making decent money for 36 games, I guess. But like I said, you're practicing every day. I had a lot of fun. Do you have pressure on you? Sure, you got a little pressure on there as well, because if you don't do that well, they bring somebody else in. And that's where I went my first year. A little town called Ajwa. There's 6,000 people. And if you do, what happens over there, it's about 45 minutes off the Autobahn. So the car is going like this. I know my wife got sick when I picked her up in the airport the first time, basically trying to drive through there. But no players want to go in that little town. So they pay a lot of money to bad A-League players. So when you start losing, then the fans don't like it. So did I have a good season for my first year? I thought I did, but I guess it wasn't good enough, so they changed me. So I went to a couple other teams before I found a niche in Turgal, where I played my last 5 years with a B-League team. But all in all, it was good for me to go over. The family was there for 6 out of 7 years, so we had a lot of fun.
Anything as a wrap up, you guys?
I would have saw that differently. I would have said B League and A League, doing the A League and Fergie in the B League, where.
Hey, I wouldn't have mentioned it. I don't know why he did. We were both in Switzerland.
Anything you want to leave us with, boys, before we wrap this up? Tommy?
Thanks for having me on. It's always good. Good luck to the show. You'll probably get rave reviews with me and Do on. We don't do a lot of things publicly together.
Oh, no question. No question.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Hey, thanks, Tommy. Dude.
Thank you two guys for doing this. It's a lot of fun, and thanks for having us on.
Okay, boys, thanks for joining us.
I thought it would be great because they're such good teammates, and they're joined at the hip, basically, both of them. So I thought it'd be great to have them both on together, and
they were good.
Hear some of the stories that they shared together.
I think Judy gets just a few more phone calls than I do.
Yeah.
Don't make me go to that story and finish it off.
Well, go ahead. Well, you got the floor. Go ahead, Tommy.
when we first started rooming, so I'm calling the wife some people would say every day. I'm going to go with every second day.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're 2 weeks into the road trip. I go, how's Julie doing? He goes, how would I know? I go, do you ever call her? He goes, no, she knows where I'm at.
That's why I said, Mike, I said, we'll be on for a week. I said, Tommy says every second day. No, that's false. Because if you know Tommy, it's every 15 minutes he talks to her here now every day. So he was at least twice a day talking to her. So he says, don't you phone Julie? I said, why would I phone Julie? Well, maybe, she wants to know what you're doing. She knows what I'm doing. I'm playing in Winnipeg tomorrow. We're playing in Calgary the day after. I said, she knows where I am. If she needs me, she can call me.
He knows where I am. That was the best. But I changed him. He started to call at least once every couple of days.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy, I know you talk to her a lot these days but it's business now, so that's a little bit different, right?
All right, guys. Well, it's been an entertaining hour speaking to a couple ex-teammates of Ricky's, Danny Daoust and Tommy Fergus. Want to thank them for joining us and sharing some of the insights to playing with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Some very interesting things we found out. So again, we're all looking forward to next week's show. We're going to have Dave Hansen on from the Hansen brothers, famous for Slapshot, but also I think more famous playing in WHA and some of the assassins that he played with back in the time. And Rick going to be able to kick in on that one. So we want to thank you guys for joining us. We want to thank the guys at the Hockey News, our supporters, and we'll talk to you again next week, you guys.